Right, this is the Smartphone Podcast, everyone. I worked very hard to write this. Our excellent team helped me along the way with some other information. So it's a great honor to speak up here, and I'll start with some phone history. So everybody knows that we didn't always have cell phones, right? Of course not. Donna, man, you couldn't just pick up a cell phone and call your friend Ricky, say, Ricky, I just learned how to make a fire. No, you had to wait about, I'd say only 328,000 years, and that's when Steve Jobs went on stage in 2007 to unveil the first ever iPhone. Now, at the time, a lot of people were thinking, why would I get this? Like, my Snake machine over here, my flip phone, it allows me to make calls, it allows me to make texts. So what do I need this brand new piece of device that, I don't know, allows me to look at maps and go online? Why would I want that? But it sold. Apple was actually was kind of back and forth about it, especially Steve Wozniak, the other man behind Apple. He thought that it would not sell well, and they were willing to and prepared to back it up if it did not sell well economically. They would have just discontinued it, but it sold incredibly well, and it sparked a lot of competition. That's the thing when you create markets like Apple did. They created the cell phone market, so now everybody is trying to compete. The first is Motorola, and then Verizon and LG, and eventually in 2009 the big boy Samsung come out and create the first ever Samsung Galaxy phone.
Yeah, and their rivalry has continued ever since. I mean, people still battle over the internet about which is better, Samsung or Apple, and it's kind of crazy. Like,
Samsung.
Sorry, guys,
So,
that was just one of our server boosters. Boost, by the way, please. You get to literally jump up on the podcast.
Samsung is way better.
So now we basically have two different sources. There's the iOS operating system software development kit, which a software development kit allows people who use the device to create different applications, programs and such for the interface. So there's iOS and then there's Android. Android is another software development kit that will eventually become very, very big, but now is basically just a knockoff Apple. That is until they came out with version 4. Version 4 of the Android device software programming kit actually allowed you to make drastic changes to the interface, which allowed for a lot more competition. And now you have two sides, Apple and Android. That's why they refer to everyone that isn't that isn't Apple as Android, because they all use some form of the Android software development kit, or they trace their roots back there.
Yeah. Yep. Alright, well, if you want me to take it from here, or if you want to continue, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you take Apple's side. I'll take Samsung's side.
Alright, so for the advantages of Apple, the user-friendliness of their platform is really good. Like, it's really hard to pick up an iPhone and not figure out how it works within 5 minutes. And that obviously comes with some downsides in terms of, like, personalization and, like, making your iPhone what you want it to be and doing a bunch of complicated stuff. Apple doesn't really do that because they're really trying to make it user-friendly. But, yeah, and then with Samsung, there's some more. I'm sure that you'll tell me, Swag.
Yeah,
cannot
so
download APKs, just saying.
So Samsung is it's a good platform, and this is also kind of a point to bring up Android, because Android kind of has all the same advantages that Samsung does. So first of all, Samsung and Android phones in general are very customizable. That is their main selling point. See, on Apple, if I want to set a custom ringtone, I have to buy a ringtone, or I have to get some shady third-party app. So it's a lot easier on Samsung because they will let you pick a file that you already have on your phone and set that as your ringtone.
Yeah, and that's just one example of the things that Samsung lets you do, or Android obviously lets you do, that are like just good. You know, they allow really great personalization and customization and everything, and Apple that's not exactly their mojo.
Yeah, but on the same note, Apple does have much better camera qualities, and they're supported by more carriers like Verizon, AT&T. All those big carriers are bound to have an iPhone deal for you. You know, they're like on the ads, like, come in, get an iPhone 13, get another one on us. You know, that sort of thing. Which, I mean, if you read the fine print, it's not exactly that simple. But
They
this is a
also
phone
do that
podcast.
for Android.
They do, but the thing with Android is you don't know if it's going to be an LG, a Samsung, or something else. It can, with the sweepstakes, and that's becoming less and less true as more and more people are using Samsung. But all Androids really will have varied support with carriers. Now, I'll take it back to my man i5 here to give you the last bit, the last advantage that Apple really has.
Okay, so now obviously this is the biggest I mean, you can't deny, even you Apple people, you can't deny it. And I'll say this, even though I own an iPhone. All right, and one thing that is really notable about the iPhone is their brand. That's one is they've spent the last 15 years building like a perfect brand, spending billions on ads, and it's just they literally have the perfect brand. Like nobody, not a single person is gonna make fun of you for having like an iPhone 13 and saying like, wow, what a sucky phone, jeez. Like nobody, no, not a single.
It is sucky.
Okay.
And that leads me into major advantage of Samsung is there are more features in the interface. Now, Apple's a lot easier to use. Anyone can pick up an iPhone and use it, just like i5 said. But if you can crack the interface of a Samsung, which isn't the most difficult, but it's a bit uncomfortable if you're just going to pick up your phone a couple of times to look at text messages or something, you will find many more intricacies and attention to detail. One great example is in the settings screen. Sure, there's a lot more options, but if you press on each option, it's going to give you exactly what it said. If you press on, there's no like, I mean, there's general settings, but if you press on general settings, you know exactly what it's going to be. Accessibility, you know, it's going to be your password, it's going to be your Face ID or your Thumb ID or whatever it's called. I don't have a Samsung, but that's the main driving force. And lastly, but not least, this is the most important piece. Samsung has Samsung Sam. Samantha Samsung herself. That is the main reason why anyone would ever buy a
Never
Samsung.
stop. Never bring that lady up.
She is a certified baddie, and I want her to be my
She's a
demon.
certified simp queen.
I of course am joking. The main advantage for any Android is customization. Customization. I hate that word.
I wouldn't say that that's the main advantage. There's a lot of really good advantages. Battery life not being one of them, but we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Well, to me, that's just the first thing that springs to mind.
Yeah, it's definitely a major advantage that they have. One thing that I'll say about Apple. Oh, wait. One thing I gotta mention about Samsung though is the repairability and storage. All right, come on. With an Apple phone, you have to spend 8 hours straight like soldering, and you have an angle grinder, and you have to have like a PhD in computer science, and that's what it takes to upgrade your storage from 64 gigabytes to 128. It's insane. And then Samsung is just like, you slide out a tray, you take out your storage, you put in a new one. 3 steps, easy, so simple. They don't charge you $400 for a terabyte when you can get a
And
50.
for any phone modders out there, they will also tell you that I'm not using. If I want to mod my phone, I am not going to use Apple. I'm going to use Samsung.
Yeah, because
We're going to tell you that.
Yeah. Now, one thing I have to
Right.
bring up about Apple though that I think people don't talk about. Obviously, Apple's been making a big push of this, but people don't talk about it as much as they should. Is the privacy that Apple has. I read a study recently where I read that Apple could have sold the data they've collected from their users for over $24 billion by now. They could have $24 billion cash in their pocket more if they hadn't gone with this whole privacy thing. That's how much they care about their users' privacy. They're willing to give up $24 billion to do it. And that's all great. I'm sure there's plenty of Samsungs that are advertised to be great privacy, but Apple has literally fought the US government tooth and nail for privacy for a long time. And that's one advantage. Obviously, their phones are pretty overpriced. You'd all have to agree on that. That Apple's, I mean, come on. They charge at least $400 over their manufacturing costs, and the margins are a lot slimmer on Samsung's side of the channel, but obviously privacy is one of their biggest advantage, if not the biggest advantage of an iPhone.
Yeah, he's right. Safari is one of the most secure browsers you can have. But I will say, this leads into our next section, is that Apple charges more, but they do because they can. Now, think about this. Now, this kind of helps illustrate my point. There are two stands. There's a food stand that you always go to get your food, and it sells you, I don't know, tacos or something. It's your favorite taco stand. You go there every day, and it's consistently good. Then this new taco stand opens up with cheaper prices, but the quality is questionable. Who are you going to go to? The guys who are more expensive, but you know the quality is going to be insanely good. Or do you go to the stand that is unknown? Maybe you think you saw some rats back there or something.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't see an employee wearing a hairnet.
Yeah.
So you're going to go to the stand that you know is always going to give you the best quality no matter what. That is why Apple has been able to charge so much for phones.
Yeah.
And that
I mean, obviously
leads into the phone wars.
Yeah. Obviously, that's not a perfect justification, and obviously that analogy has holes in it, but you guys understand the gist of it, right? Like Samsung, obviously they're not like the crappy off-brand of Apple, and obviously Apple isn't the best thing in history, but you guys understand, right? Like iPhones, there's never been a bad iPhone release, like ever. No.
Well, I
It's
mean,
been overpriced and it's had problems, but there's never one where you'd look at the iPhone and be like, yeah, that really sucks. Like Nokia would be better than that. No. They've always been consistent.
well, I will say i5. When I said that, I should have cleared this up. I wasn't explicitly saying that Apple was the good taco stand, Samsung was the shitty one. What I was trying to say was that Apple here has just built a really good name for themselves. Samsung has too, though, but they had that issue with the Note 20 blowing up and stuff. The battery kept overheating. But I say you can make the argument that Samsung has done the exact same thing that Apple has done with their taco stand. They keep giving you good quality, so you keep wanting to pay more for it. But Samsung realizes that they're trying to attract an audience that has only used Apple. So that now they're realizing they have to keep their prices low if they want to be able to compete. That's the main gist of it.
Yeah, because obviously if you're like a boomer and you've been buying iPhones for the last decade and they've always been great, you've literally never had a problem with them, then it's going to take a lot to switch you over. Like, you're gonna, there's gonna have to be better prices. The old boomers gonna have to be on Facebook and see a bunch of ads that are like, better screen, higher quality, 10 times better camera. It's like, so it takes a lot to compete. And that's why Samsung is not doing what Apple's doing, is because their brand obviously isn't quite as strong. And that's fine, they're doing fine. But, yeah.
But then there was an exodus. Samsung started selling very stagnantly, while Apple continued to grow up through the iPhone 5. until it happened, the phone wars. I coined this term.
You gotta give
But the
Samsung
phone
the
wars-
benefit of the doubt, because I have like one side of my family use Apple and one side use Android, and the Apple phones, I swear, break like every other day, and Androids have lasted like 2, 4, 5 years even, with just like a garbage little case. Just saying.
To clarify, we're not endorsing either side. We're leaving this open for the viewers to decide which one they want. We're not trying to persuade you to
Yeah.
one side of the coin.
And everything we've said has been backed up with evidence, so if you just
Yes,
think
yes,
something is
of
true, I'd encourage you to research it. Like, as you may know, Apple's been doing this whole thing with higher hardness screens and harder to break, more durable phones. And people have done drop tests, and basically both phones are kind of indestructible in terms of stuff that you'd be exposed to in a phone. Like, the newest, like, Samsung Note 22, you can spray a fire hose on it and it will work fine. Same thing with the iPhone. You can literally freeze them, you can drop them. Like, both of them aren't just gonna break. The flagship phones that people don't have right now and haven't upgraded to yet a lot of the time, on both sides are just kind of... saying that Samsung is better than Apple in that category isn't exactly true. They're kind of just the same. And, oh yes, Bell is offering popcorn as always. That's great. You guys might want to cash in on that. Do you have anything you want to say, Swan? To add on to
Yes, well, the phone wars is a term that I coined, and I say it happens with the release of the iPhone 6. And sure, this is the time that the phone industry also happened to boom incredibly. Just overnight, it's just incredible how huge that it got right at that point. It had been growing for years, but that 2016, I say, is the point of no return, where basically everyone says, I have to get that new iPhone, or I have to get that new Android. So the phone wars are when both sides have basically competed to the point that neither can get an upper hand anymore. So economically, for example, Apple's made more money, but they also invented the industry. And the smartphone industry is so saturated. And saturated means that there's... The textbook definition of saturated basically means that something is holding water so much that it's busting at the seams, and any more water would make it tear. Take a plastic bag that has so much water that if you add a little bit more, it's just gonna tear, and water's gonna go everywhere. That's basically the iPhone industry, or the smartphone industry. It's so saturated, and there's no new room for competition. You know, it's incredible how little room there is for competition. i5, you won't have anything to add?
No, not particularly.
I just didn't want us to interrupt each other, because that makes for a pretty bad podcast experience. But yeah, so what drives the phone industry more than any other industry in my eyes isn't advertising campaigns, isn't all this other stuff that other industries can use just fine. It's honestly, the best way I can compare it to is the console gaming industry, how saturated the market that is. So what drives people to buy certain phones, which is the same as consoles, I think, is basically experience. How good has this been for me in the past? That's why people stick with one side. Because when they have a bad experience, they're not going to stick with that, because there's so little that changes between phone to phone. It's basically just, this one has a better camera and Face ID, or this one, we got rid of the home screen. Maybe once every 5 or 6 phones there'll be just a massive change, but that doesn't really happen. The iPhone 1, 2, and 3 were all very identical. The iPhone 4 changed it up a little bit. The iPhone 5 was really changed it up, and then the iPhone 10 was the one that just made it so what it is today. The iPhone 10 really is what made that switch, you know. So what I would say to that is it relies on name brand recognition and past qualities that you've had with it. For example, if I were to make a phone with the advantages of Samsung and Apple, it probably wouldn't get off the ground very well. Sure, I could advertise it, tell everyone this, but they're like, I don't know, I'm going to stick to my iPhone, I'm going to stick to my Android. They don't really give it a second thought because they've had no experience with it. It's not until they buy it that they say, this phone company makes very high quality phones, I'll buy it. So I will need customers to talk it up, but the problem is if you don't get enough customers to support it in the first place, sure, eventually it'll get big, but my phone company would be dead in the water before it even started. I'd be so far into debt because it's so hard to sell these things because of how saturated the market really is. And I'd say it's the same with console gaming. If I were to create a new console that was more powerful, better, you know, it was just light years better than Xbox Series X, PS5, Nintendo Switch. Doesn't matter. Third-party developers know that this console doesn't sell very well, so they're gonna make too many games for it, and then they're not gonna sell enough games. They're gonna be up over their head. So all markets that are created like this trend towards this direction of being so saturated to the brim with competition that there's no room for expansion. With that leads us into our audience question for tonight. I5.
Alright, so yeah, I'm sure a lot of you guys are really excited to answer this question, especially Mr. Cheesein and Pat, who have been popping in and voicing their opinions a little bit. Boost the server, by the way, and then maybe you could do that. Literally talk on the podcast. Anyway, yeah, but this question you guys are probably pretty excited about is, which do you prefer? All of you guys. What do you have? What do you think is better? Apple or Samsung? What do you guys think? What do you guys think? I don't want you to come up. I want you to say it in the chat, alright? Say it in the chat. I know...
No, I'm gonna say it right here. Okay, I'm gonna say it. I think that you're only, like... I think Samsung. I like Android, but not Samsung. I think they're overpriced for what they are. Like, you don't have to buy a name brand Android. You can buy, like, other brands.
A Motorola. An LG.
Yeah,
we're just
LG
saying,
actually
like,
got discontinued.
Android versus
so.
iOS. Just answer that, alright?
Android.
Alright.
Nokia, of course, Nokia. How could I overlook Nokia?
Oh yeah, Nokia.
There
is
are
first.
modern Nokia phones.
Alright, we're aware. Here, I haven't seen you say a single thing in chat.
Me?
No. Don't worry about it. Yeah, but you guys obviously like Nokia. A lot of you like Apple. A lot of you like Android. It's obviously pretty split topic. I don't see... this really shouldn't be something that's... this really shouldn't be something that people are mad about. People are already mad enough about politics, constantly yelling at each other. It's already...
But, guys, we're just kidding. We're definitely going to do a politics podcast next time. Not really. I'm just kidding.
That would be a disaster. Alright? Anyway,
I'm even still with that one.
yeah, but, obviously there's too much hatred already with stuff like politics existing and all that. And let's try not to, like, make this another thing that we're yelling at each other about, but don't be afraid, you know, like, say what you think is better. And yeah, do you think you guys have, if there's anything else that you forgot to mention, I'd say it now, because we're gonna move on from our audience question in a second here.
Alright, well, the next section, I5, I think that you've been patient enough. I think you can take this one.
Alright, so, basically, in conclusion, both Android and iOS have advantages and disadvantages. And, it's basically entirely based on your experience and your user preferences and all that, which is better. You can throw a bunch of numbers in someone's face, but they're not gonna mean the real difference. It's gonna be their experience, what they think, what their friends think, all that. And it's a crazy market. We've had iPhones and phones and all that for a long time, and it's been a wild ride. And in 2021, we have really good phones. Now we've reached like the pinnacle of iPhones. Or not iPhones, phones in general. I don't know why I keep saying iPhones as a replacement for smartphones, but I've been doing that, so I apologize for that. And yeah, in conclusion, basically, they each have their advantages and disadvantages, different price points, all that, and just do your own research and figure out what you want. And that's all I'll recommend, is to do your own research. Don't listen to what people say. Like, figure it out yourself. Like, Google stuff, figure it out, and yeah, that's probably honestly the best way.
Say that on the business end, this is the whole time, if you can't tell, I've been taking the business end, and i5 has been taking the more practicality sort of end. That's kind of been our thing for this podcast. It was a bit unintentional, but it worked. So what I would say, to add on to what i5 has so gracefully presented before you, is that really, regardless on your opinion, regardless of who you think is better, it's not it's Apple, by the way, just kidding, I don't really have an opinion, but you have to admire what Steve Jobs did when he stepped onto that stage in 2007 and announced this new technology, this alien, foreign technology that we have now accepted to the point that all of us on Earth, well, not all of us, but around 85% of us own a smartphone. That is so incredible of an achievement. That's such an incredible achievement that I don't even have words to describe how impressive that is. You have to admire how brave he was that day to present this new technology in front of a crowd.
Yeah, and then obviously a lot of that was, not exactly. Obviously, his motivation wasn't entirely like the motivation of an Olympic champion. It wasn't to achieve something; it was for the money, and obviously that worked out monumentally. But you are right about he was brave to do that. It was a brave business venture, but obviously that's not the entirety of it.
And I would like to dedicate this podcast to the deceased Steve Jobs. He gave us so much in this world that we couldn't live without, and he did a great job. Rest in peace, Steve Jobs.
Yeah, rest in peace, Steve Jobs. You really invented a whole industry, and I'm sure our lives would be a lot better without it, but, we all like our phones, don't we?
Well, I think that just about wraps everything up, unless somebody wants to speak.
Nope. I'm gonna move our boosters onto stage now, and then I'll disband it in about 5 minutes.
I need to say something very important. This is my opinion only. No politics.
Okay, good.
Nokia is the best iPhone, and there's nothing you can do to change my opinion.
Yeah, he's right on that one. You guys got to admit.